Simone Biles dropped out of the individual competition at the Olympics to focus on her mental health. And female athletes have grabbed the spotlight at the Olympics with their political and social demonstrations. We discuss all that and more coming up right here on Fourth and Just Us. Welcome to Fourth and Just Us, everyone. We are so glad that you are able to join us on this Wednesday morning for the intersection, the conversation, race, sports, politics. We bring it to you right here with myself, Lericia Harris, Kevin A.D. Anderson, and Dr. Leonard Moore. Now, we want to remind you to like us on Facebook, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, and don't forget you can always comment throughout the entire show on whatever platform that you're watching us. We also want to remind you too that the views on this show are that of ours. They are our own views. They do not represent or reflect anyone else or any other institution or business. They reflect our own personal views. So we wanted to remind you of that. We have so much to talk about today, and we are excited to bring you these various topics. And we're going to start off with what's happening right now with the Olympics. We know that the breaking news is that Simone Biles, the U.S. gymnastics superstar, has withdrawn from the individual all-around competition to prioritize her well-being. This is literally 24 hours after withdrawing from the women's team finals. Now, with this, and Biles being one of the greatest gymnasts of all time, she was a favorite to take home the gold, especially for the individual all around. And she may still have the opportunity to compete in other individual events. She does have, I believe, about 4 events scheduled for next week. But as of right now, she stated that she's taking it one day at a time. And she so eloquently said and made it known that her mental health and her well-being was a top priority as of right now. What are your thoughts, guys, on the decision that she made to go forth right now? AD?
Good morning. It took a lot of courage for her to step forward and to realize that, and then to come and be able to talk about it. So, I give her all the credit in the world. And, this thing with this mental health issue is more preeminent now than ever. And we all need to pay attention to it because of what kind of factor it could lead into further things that will happen to these athletes. So I commend her for it.
I'm happy for her. I think a lot of Black athletes and athletes in particular are just taught to suck it up and tough it out. But, let's just step back for a minute, Lericia. Look at what she's doing. She's not playing soccer. She ain't playing basketball. This sister is doing stuff where if you're not mentally at the top of your game, you could severely injure yourself. And I was watching it late last night, and they said on one of the, I guess when she ran, I don't know if there's the horse thing she jumped on, and she said that, said that she kind of lost, she forgot where she was in many ways as she was coming down. So I think number one, understand the sport she's in and how she could risk severe injury. But number two, let me say this, Lericia, I am proud that she had the ability to say, you know what, I'm not all there, and I think too often, if you look at the history of African-American athletes, we have always been expected to make these superhuman, these extra human performances, and we're expected to perform day in and day out. And the sister just said, I didn't have it tonight. So I'm proud of her. And I hope more African-American athletes, in many ways, will use her as sort of a role model.
Doc, hey, could I add on to that? She focused on her team. And she made a decision for her team. And that's commendable in itself because, she wanted to make sure that they had the best effort and possibility of winning a gold. So, that's commendable in itself.
For sure. And I totally echo those sentiments, AD. And I saw it this morning as well from a former U.S. Olympic gymnast herself, Dominique Dawes, who came out. And that was her main point, saying that she commended Simone for having that attitude of putting her team first in essence, because she knew that she wasn't mentally there. And I think I totally agree. That's commendable for somebody to step back and say, I'm not all the way there. I know that I cannot help put us in a better situation. So let me take myself out of it so I won't jeopardize anything, let alone my own personal health. I think that's to be commended, and she needs to, be uplifted and supported because of that, because it shows a huge amount of strength just on her behalf, because she's not only thinking about herself, like you said, AD, she's thinking about her team and putting her team in the best position to be able to win. And what I do like as well is that her teammates actually dedicated the silver medal that they
Yes.
won for the team competition to Simone Biles. And I read, I think it was NBC that actually reported it, that the team was a little nervous when Simone made the decision to step back from the women's finals. But one of the teammates stepped up and said, we have to do this, let alone for her, because she put us in a better situation to be able to make it to the medal stand. So again, I commend Simone Biles for taking that step back and putting not only herself first, but putting her team in a better situation as well. Go ahead, Doc.
Lericia, let me add this. USA Gymnastics has been a toxic organization for a long time. And we're familiar with the stuff Larry Nasser did and his assistant coach. I had no idea that Simone Biles was one of the victims of that nonsense. You know what I mean? So what I saw last night was not only did Simone Biles step back, but I think what we also saw last night that nobody talked about was Simone Biles is saying, no, we are USA Gymnastics. It's us out there. It's young women out there who've been preparing our whole life for this. And so I think what we saw yesterday in many ways was a symbolic passing of the torch, where Simone Biles, being the GOAT that she is, she's basically saying, hey, I'm going to run USA Gymnastics, and we're going to make sure none of that nonsense, that abuse, physical, sexual, emotional abuse that went on, that's not going to take place anymore. So that's what I saw last night while watching her step back.
Hey, Doc, the other thing is that if we reflect back to the NBA playoffs, there were people who were injured that were not on the bench with their team encouraging them on. And she was the biggest cheerleader last night, supporting her teammates and everything else. And I think that says a lot in itself and what kind of person and what kind of character she has.
Absolutely.
For sure. And then this again comes on the heels of Naomi Osaka actually stepping away from tennis to focus on her mental health as well. So it brings up the conversation of where is this going now as it pertains to athletes. It's becoming something that's more prominent, and I feel like it's also allowing people to see that, or remind people that athletes are human. Yeah. Because sometimes I think that's often forgotten. And so to you all, where is this conversation headed now? Is it something that people or athletes themselves are more comfortable with talking about as it pertains to their mental health and the pressures that actually comes with this spotlight of being a prominent athlete?
Yeah. I think what it shows, Lericia, is a lot of our kids are burnt out. You know what I mean? Parents burn them out. The community burns them out. These club coaches burn them out. Just think about how many hours Naomi Osaka has probably spent at a tennis court, or Simone Biles has spent, in a gym. And I think, gymnastics and tennis, they compete year round. They don't play any other sport, so their bodies get worn down. And I think in many ways, a lot of these high profile athletes, particularly in the country club sports, put Tiger Woods in there, the Williams sisters in there, Sloane Stephens in there. In many ways, Lericia, they've missed their childhood. They didn't really, Woods went to college for a year or two, but didn't really go to college. And so I think for a lot of these kids, they've been on this conveyor belt since they were like 6 or 7. And now at 2021, they are burnt out. And I am happy that they have the courage to stand up and say, you know what? Nah, we ain't doing this today.
Well, Doc, you're absolutely right. It's a grind. And at a certain point, it doesn't become fun. It doesn't become a game. It doesn't become something that they want to do. It's that as the parents and everything else, it's like, I have to do it. And when you're in a job and you have to do it and you don't like it, it's just not any good for your health or anything else. It's just a matter of, Lericia, answering your question, this is going to go beyond mental health. These young people, and I, working with Leonard, I've seen this, that they know they have a voice, and they know.
Did we lose Kevin's voice? Did we lose Kevin's sound?
I think we lost Kevin's voice there for a second, but we'll get it back here.
Yeah.
But I think the direction that he was going was that a lot of the students and a lot of these prominent athletes, regardless of their young age, they now know that they have a voice, and they now know that it's important for them to put their mental health and their just overall well-being top line right now, because like you
Right.
said, Doc, some of them could be burnt out, and I think it's
Yeah.
important for them that if they want to continue and have longevity in whatever sport or whatever game that they're in, they have to prioritize their mental
Mhm.
health and know when it's okay to step away. And so again, I commend both Simone Biles
Yeah.
and Naomi Osaka for making those decisions and putting it or making it a priority for themselves.
And let me add this, Lericia. I think, like, again, for Black kids in country club sports, swimming,
Mm-hmm.
gymnastics, tennis, because there aren't too many other Black people playing, there is this pressure. You realize you gotta be way better than everybody else. And and even in volleyball, I was telling a story to my wife last night. Here at the University of Texas, they have phenomenal volleyball players, probably the most
Yep.
African American African Americans on a women's volleyball team in the country. And these are some of the best girls in the country. And I was talking to them about some of the challenges my daughter and her friends had playing volleyball, which is a largely white club sport. And Lericia, they told me, now these are some of the best people in the country now. They told me when they were coming up through the club system, they dealt with this subtle discrimination, girls not wanting to set them so they could get hits. And I'm like, you dealt with that? And they all shook their head and they say, Dr. Moore, we all have the same experience. So I understand the pressure, because it's like you are above and beyond better than anybody else in order for you to get an opportunity.
And then also as a Black woman, and a Black woman who might be, like you said, in a specific, excuse me, I could not get that out, a specific position, it's oftentimes you feel like you have to come in and there are these unsaid
Yes.
expectations of you, right? And then you also come in with this pressure of, I have to be the best, because one, whoever is in certain positions, they don't think I'm qualified to be here in the first
Right.
place. So not only that, I know that I have to work 10 times harder to make
Mhm.
sure that I just show myself, in essence, like, you have to show yourself worthy of even being there. And
Right.
then not only does that bring about pressure, once you make it to a certain point, you
Mm.
often have to deal with imposter syndrome, because you get there and you're like, well, am I supposed to be here?
Right.
Do I fit in? Am I doing a good job? So you have that pressure of doubting yourself sometimes. That's a lot to deal with. That's a lot to handle.
Lericia, let me ask you, as a reporter, the Mariah Taylor, Malika Andrews, they were very, very prominent during the NBA Finals.
Hmm.
You Could you just share for us what that pressure was, probably not that you're speaking for them, but just give us an insight into your industry, what that pressure was like for Mariah Taylor and also for Malika Andrews. What does that feel like when you're on the sideline reporting and you're hosting a game? What is the pressure like for a Black woman in that situation?
Well, for Maria Taylor, like I said, I'm like you said, I cannot speak for them.
Mhm.
This
Mhm.
is just my perception or my understanding, just from me being a reporter itself. Maria Taylor, for a lot of people, was at the top of her game.
Mhm.
Before leaving ESPN, at the top, where a lot of young women strive to be. And
Mhm.
so, as a Black woman in that position, it is that extra weight of, one, knowing that you, in essence, are representing other young women who are coming behind you,
Mhm.
and making sure that you do a good job so that others behind you get that same opportunity. That's a lot of pressure in itself. And as far as Malika Andrews, I can understand and see that there's pressure there from her being such a young reporter, specifically dealing with the situation that took place to even put
Mhm.
her in that position, to allow her to be able to be the reporter for the finals in the championship game, for her to be propelled there under those circumstances, and also just knowing that all eyes are going to be on her because of that
Yeah.
specific situation that propelled her there. That's a lot of pressure within itself, even though we know that Malika Andrews is bomb and she was gonna
Right.
knock it out the park anyway, because she's so eloquent and she is great at what she does. But
Mhm.
there's still that unwritten pressure there that, I just have to do well. I have to make sure I speak well. I have to make sure I deliver this story well, because others are watching. And there's always
Mhm.
going to be someone out there who, one, doesn't want you in that position, and two, won't take your spot. So you have to always be on your game. And it's like I said, with being a black woman, that's extra added pressure because you oftentimes feel as if you're not wanted there anyway sometimes.
Well, Lericia, in the psychological literature, there's a phrase there's a condition called John Henryism. John Henry was this folk hero. They said, he worked hard. He could stop a train with his bare hands. But the moral of the story is that he worked so hard till he died. And I think a lot of us, Lericia, probably me, you, Kevin, and even Wayne, our producer, we were taught from parents and grandparents that we have to work twice as hard to go half as far. And I think what happens, we take on all these assignments, extra responsibilities in the hope, that they will finally see my talent, you know what I mean? And they will elevate me. I like to tell the story about Stephen A. Smith and Tony Romo. Now, Stephen A. Smith is getting his bread without a doubt, but Stephen A. Smith is on pretty much 7 days a week on some ESPN platform. I think making $8-9 million a year, great money. Tony Romo, I think he's getting like 15 or 16 million, Lericia. You probably know better than I do. And this brother does one game a week, the NFL, maybe a couple preseason games, regular season and playoff games. And that is what we talk about, how, we've got to be exceptional. And Mariah Taylor was on a lot of ESPN platforms. So this John Henryism, and this affects black folks in all industries. I don't care if you're a bus driver, you're a professor, you're a physician, this idea where we work so hard in hopes of getting recognized and getting promoted and getting picked, that we sometimes work ourselves to death.
It's definitely something that happens across the board. Is Kevin back with us? Are you with us now, Kevin?
I am. I'm sorry about
okay,
that.
Great.
No problem.
Doc, I want to take that a step further. Many times we're the only ones that look like us in the room.
Right.
True.
And combating that is, the ultimate effort as well. So, there's a lot of pressure on all of us. And particularly, as you said, we grew up and we were told that we have to be the best. And, just from a mental health issue, that's a lot of pressure each and every day. So, a lot of people don't look at that and understand that. But you have to commend these people because they go and they're at the top of their game and they're doing what they need to do. And yet we still have to fight some of these stigmas.
But I think people oftentimes too have to realize that if you have a mental block at some point, no matter where you are in your career, in your life, or whatever you might be, striving to obtain, it's okay to have a mental block at some point. It happens to everybody. It's okay. But just like, similar to what Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka did, put yourself first so that you can work to overcome that mental block. And then you can continue on. That way you help to alleviate yourself of the pressures, the unwanted weight that has been added to your shoulders, maybe even unknowingly, just because it's sort of this stigma that's there. But it's okay if you have that mental block. It is okay to take a step back for a second just to get yourself together, because it's only going to help you propel and go forward even further.
Lericia, I could speak to that. I had to step away. The job and having people wanting me to do things that were totally against my moral fiber. And then, the pressure of the job just got to me where I'm not doing this anymore. And I got to spend some time. But the thing is that I stepped back and realized I missed a lot of things. I missed a lot of my family, my kids growing up. And, I was a different person because I was always trying to pursue. And I worked that job 24/7 and it wasn't healthy. Wow. And so now, I come into this new job and I have a different perspective. And, my main focus is to help these young men and women become better people.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of new job, congratulations to you, Kevin, for stepping into this new role. Would you like to share with our viewers exactly what it is?
Yes, I'm working at the Air Force Academy, and I'm overseeing 7 sports and working with the department on how we're going to get better.
Awesome. Congratulations,
Congratulations, brother.
Thank you.
So excited for you as it pertains to your new role.
I just want to thank y'all. Some people might think that was something else there, so I'll let that go. But I just want to thank all y'all for being my biggest supporters and getting through this, and then us being able to come together and having me perform with you guys, because you do a tremendous job.
Of course. Thank you. But I want us to keep the conversation rolling because we have so much to talk about, right? Also happening in the Olympics, we know that a lot of the female athletes have grabbed the spotlight with their political and social demonstrations. Now, there was a new rule that was implemented by the International Olympic Committee, which allowed athletes to express their views on the field of play before competition or during the introduction of athletes or teams. Now, this new guideline allowed for expressions if they aren't or weren't against people, countries, organizations, and or their dignity and weren't disruptive. So we've seen a lot of the female athletes come to the forefront and actually, leading these various protests. For example, many have been advocating racial equality and also taking ownership of what they want to wear during competitions. The Norwegian women's beach handball team decided to wear shorts instead of the bikini bottoms. They were actually fined because of it, but we know that a pop star Pink offered to pay those fines for them. Another example was a Costa Rican gymnast, Lucia Alvarado. She paid tribute to the Black Lives Matter movement by ending out her floor routine, taking a knee and also putting her fists in the air. And other several women's soccer teams, including the U.S. team before its opening match against Sweden, they began the match by taking a knee. When you hear about these various stories and everything that has taken place, are you one, shocked that it's the women who are yet again leading this effort? And two, are you excited to see these women using their voices and making their presence known that they stand for and against certain things?
No, I'm not,
JD?
Rich. I'm not surprised. Like Dawn Staley said, we had our first show back in April. She said Black women were built for this. And if you look at every movement Black people have had, civil rights movement, Black power movement, Great Migration, Black women have always been at the center of it. They have just been so gracious to allow men to take credit for it. I tell people the Montgomery bus boycott was not led by Martin Luther King. He was a spokesperson. They didn't lead it. It was led by a group of women called the Women's Political Council of Montgomery. So this is just following in that same tradition, Lericia.
I don't like a lot of these uniforms. I think they're exploitive, and that I think that it needs to be changed. I mean, we look at it and dealing with other women's issues. We should start looking at that as well. And there needs to be a change because there's no reason why they can't wear, the same as men. And I just don't think it's right.
I don't think it's right as well. And it really hurt my heart to hear that the handball team was fined for deciding to wear shorts. Who said it was okay for you to fine somebody for making a decision about what they want to wear, even though it did not affect their performance in any way? Who gave you that right? I just think that's completely bizarre. And it really upset me because it really showed some of the sexist ways in the Olympics. And it also makes you
Yes.
question how far have we really come? Because at one point, women weren't even allowed to participate in the Olympics. And now women still have to fight for something as small as you wanting to make a change to your uniform, even though it doesn't affect your performance and you get fined for it. I think that's
Yes.
completely outrageous. Now, I'm not sure. I don't believe the German gymnastics team was fine, but I love the protest that they did as well, where they decided to wear complete unitards all the way down to their ankles instead of the typical, ones that we saw that are often cut off at your hips. Not once was their performance affected as well. Like they were still able to get their job done, and they still look great. And like I said, they got the job done. So why is it such a problem for women to make these changes or for things to just happen to be all inclusive?
My first question would be who made the decision and what was the makeup of that committee? Was it all men? Were the women on there? And if there were women on there, did they speak up and say this isn't right and that they shouldn't be fined $15,000? So, we have to look at that in totality. But I do think that, we need to start looking at that and we need to have more voices in to have people realize that, a lot of people are looking at this and it's not the right thing to do, and we've moved far from that, and it's just exploiting women and having them wear those uniforms.
For sure. For sure. But again, the fact that we have these various countries, the various races, I believe taking a stand and showing that they are also allies for the African American community, the minority community, I think it's commendable. love what the women are doing, leading the efforts, and it just is piggybacking off of all the protests and all the
Yeah.
demonstrations that we've seen here in the U.S. that have come to the forefront within the past year or so. So I think that's something to truly be pretty proud of and to support as well. And I also want to make note that what the young lady did, the Costa Rican gymnast, what she did, according to NBC Olympics, her performance was the first of its kind on an international stage in elite gymnastics.
Wow. Yeah.
So I think that's
And
something to be proud
the
of.
rich, when I saw that, I got to remind folk, we got to go travel. There is a very vibrant, Afro Costa Rican culture there, a very vibrant Black community in Costa Rica. So, folk, I know y'all going to these resorts and all that, but some point you got to leave the resort and go hang out with the people. All right. Then you will see in many ways this vibrant Black culture. Then you'll see what we talk about when we talk about the diaspora. All right.
For sure.
Doc, you're getting heavy on us.
Come on, man.
That's why he's Dr. Leonard Moore. You know he's going to take
Absolutely.
us deep. You know he's going to
Absolutely.
take the conversation deep.
Absolutely.
But let's go here. The U.S. men's basketball team. They are currently on a stretch of must-win games at the Tokyo Olympics, and they actually won a game against Iran. But we have seen them. It's been a slow start for them. What do you think is the problem, AD?
I think that they thought they could just step on the court and it was going to be automatic. And when they first lost the two exhibition games, I don't think they really cared. They said, we're just going to gear up for the Olympics. Then when they played France, that was a wake-up call. I think you're going to see a different product from them now, and that they know that if they lose, they're going to be eliminated. So I think that's going to be a key motivator for them. And if Popovich does a good job, he's using that for a motivator to make sure that they don't want to go home without the gold medal.
I think it's lack of interest. I don't think the gold medal carries much weight as it used to. I think these players are playing year round. I think they're tired. Sometimes you look at the composition of the team, it doesn't make the most sense. There are no fans in the stadium. Your family's not there. I mean, it's just they're probably bored. They're probably bored. But here's my question. Why do we as Americans, why do we have to win everything? It would be much more enjoyable for me to watch if they said, okay, our Olympic team will be made up of players with less than 3 or 4 years in the league. It would be fun to watch young guys who may really want to be there, really trying to make a name for themselves. But I have no interest in watching any of the games because flat out, Lericia, the games are boring.
Well, hey, Doc, I have a different perspective. And I think what's happening in our country, too, is there's a lack of competition. Everybody gets a trophy. Now, some people agree with that. But, I think that, winning and losing creates character. And it's how you do it and how we have coaches. And so, but the other thing that, Doc, I'm going to tell you is that it's just like everybody wants a ring. They want to win the world championship. And they want to win a gold medal because they're going to come home. And these people who have gold medals and everything else, don't you think that they're going to talk about these guys and say, well, you came back without a medal? And you know how it is. We get to talking that stuff with one. Well, okay, I'll just put it this way. What do you think Charles Barkley's going to say?
Gotcha. I hear you.
What do you think anybody from the Dream Team is going to say?
Oh, Michael's going to dog him.
I just don't think this generation is that interested. I don't think it means anything to them, particularly when you think about the current the racial climate in the country right now. You know what I'm saying? I mean, let's not forget about all that kind of stuff.
The views of Kevin B. Anderson do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense, the Department of the Air Force, or the United States government,
Because Kevin definitely
or
came
the producers of Ford and Justice.
Because Kevin definitely came in and low-key poked at Pop Warner a little bit, saying that everybody shouldn't get a participation trophy. I heard that, Kevin. I heard that.
No, well, I'll tell you and this was a long time ago because y'all remind me that I'm the oldest one on the show. But, it made me want to win more when I saw the other people getting trophies, and I stood there and watched that. It made me want to be better. It made me want to compete more. And I just don't see that in some of these young ones anymore. It's all about me, and it's all about what I can do. And then it reflects on the parents too. So my friend was coaching an AAU game, and there was a mother with her kid, and the kid didn't play a lot, but they won a championship. She didn't let him go get the trophy because he didn't play.
Wow. That's hardcore, man. That's hard.
Yeah.
I know my son's team, they won a 7-on-7 tournament a few years ago. They were like 11 or 12 or 10. And they beat this team. And so now my son's team beats them. But then after the other team, they're playing We Are the Champions as they're passing out the little ice cream, the little Debbie's and the little vanilla ice cream. I'm like, what? I mean, did we lose? But so Kevin, I feel you, man. You don't like that participation trophy, huh?
Well, I could go on and on, but what I see too is that when I hire these young folks now, I'll have someone come in my office and they've been on the job for a week and they want to go on vacation. Or 6 months from here. So, Mr. Anderson, when am I going to get a promotion? When am I going to get a raise?
They trying to get that bag, brother. We tell them students, shoot your shot. All they can say is no.
The views of Kevin B. Anderson do not necessarily reflect the views.
Okay, well, we know that Kevin thinks that the parents are making the babies a little softer now by giving participation trophies, and we know that Doc is encouraging students to shoot your shot, chase that money, and get the bag if you can.
That's right.
If you don't ask, you won't know.
That's right.
Moving on now to college football. The latest news, Texas and Oklahoma with the potential of joining the SEC. They began the formal process of unwinding from the Big 12 to join the SEC. Both schools have agreed that they will not renew their grants of media rights following the expiration in 2025. So this week, they officially notified the SEC that they are seeking an invitation to membership beginning July 1st, 2025, and that is according to a joint statement from the flagship programs of the Big 12. So sources say that the SEC presidents and chancellors are meeting tomorrow, this Thursday, to consider whether or not OU and Texas will receive the official membership and what could be the first 16-team super conference. Two things here. What happens to the Big 12 if this move goes through? AD?
So what did Gordon Gekko say? Greed is good. And that's what we're seeing right now. So I see this, it's going to go much further. And now the Big Ten is talking about, and what makes a lot of sense, and the Big Ten network could have a subscribership from coast to coast. So I would look at having UCLA, USC, Cal, Stanford, Oregon, and Washington become members of the Big Ten. So now you have from coast to coast that distributorship and subscriptionship. And now, you're looking at mega dollars. And it's not going to stop there because then the SEC is going to do it. And hey, the last person is going to be holding the bag. And a lot of these teams are not going to be in a competitive conference as far as it comes from economics, because Oklahoma State does not have a large TV area in which they can, thrive on, and they're not attractive to a lot of people. So I see this thing going where, as somebody said the other day, it's going to be Sunday on Saturday.
So do you not think that the Big 12 will, in essence, or has the potential to possibly dissolve? Because you are taking away these large institutions who do bring that prominence, who do bring that attraction to the Big 12. Do you not think it could potentially dissolve?
Well, let's say this, that if the Big Ten and the Pac-12 merged and some of those Arizona State, Utah, Oregon State, I could see them going into the Big 12 with the remaining schools there and having that kind of conference. But again, the TV market drives all this. And so the money and what Texas and Oklahoma is seeing, the money won't be as great. And so now it's definitely going to be the haves and have-nots. But, my biggest concern is that it's going to deny a lot of opportunity, and we're going to get a pay for play model if this continues. There's no question about this. So, a question I have for all of you is, where does the value of the education and the scholarship go? Because if it goes to us like a pro model, academics is not going to be any part of this. So, I mean, where do we go from there? What do we require? I mean, the NCAA, we're looking at them, and where do they come in? And then the last thing no one's talking about, this is going to be in the politicians' hands. So the thing that I would do too is, if we want this to look anywhere near the model we have now and that it thrives on education, the politicians, Congress is going to have to get involved, and they're all going to have to sit down and come up with a happy medium to say, this is what we want it to look like. This is what we have to do. Because, the biggest thing is the salaries and the money that they're putting in these facilities. And that, Doc Moore and I have talked about this before, is that some of that money has to be shared with the student athletes, or we have to put a cap on these salaries and what we spend on these buildings to make sure that we can make it as equal as possible. And, that's totally out of the question. Because, hey, Doc, what's going on down in Texas. And so, and we look at Alabama and everything else. So it's just going to be a different day. And what that different day is, we don't know, because we haven't seen leadership come up and say, hey, we're going to do this. In fact, when Mark Emmert came back and said he wanted to give more autonomy to the conferences, that just showed me that they don't want to be a big part of this.
Doc?
So Lericia, as I've been a Longhorn for 14 years.
Yes, you have.
It's long overdue. It's long overdue. Let me explain why. Every year I look at the Texas football schedule, and there literally is one game on there, Oklahoma, but some years that's the only game. And so for the last 10 or 12 years, we've had to play Kansas State, Kansas, Iowa State, Baylor, Texas Tech, TCU. The schedule is boring.
You sound disappointed.
No, I'm happy that they're going to the SEC.
I'm saying you sounded disappointed based upon that schedule.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's because it's boring. It's not interesting. Ames, Iowa, really? Manhattan, Kansas, really? Lawrence, Kansas, really? Waco, Texas, really? No offense, Fort Worth. Nobody wants to go there. And I haven't always wondered, why is the University of Texas, where I teach, why are they in this weak conference? Now, the problem is the Big 12 leadership must have been sleeping, because I saw this coming a long time ago. They are not going to stay in this conference. It doesn't do anything for them. Now, to Kevin's point about where does this take college sports, I think we're headed to a model, and one that I don't think is a bad model, where you completely disconnect college sports from the academic enterprise. Make it like minor league football. Bobby Bowden said something a long time ago, and somebody said, how many of your players graduate, Kevin? He said, those that want to. And I was like, you know what? That is a very, very profound statement. And Kevin, you talk about the academic enterprise. I think, number one, I think a lot of Black student athletes get a bad rap, like they aren't interested in education. I found a lot of them want to get a degree. They want to go to the league as well. And those two goals are not in conflict with each other. But I think, we're in for some cataclysmic changes. But just like UT is going to get that money, Oklahoma going to get that money, I tell every student, every single Black student athlete, go get your bag and go get your NIL deal before they change the rules.
So hey, Doc, I don't want to disrespect the Longhorns, but they haven't won a championship in the Big 12 for a long time. So them going into the SEC is really going to be challenging for them. So when you talk about boring is when they go out there and they're dominating and they're kicking everybody's ass, and that hasn't been happening. But so
Kevin,
the challenge
they won 3 Big 12 championships in 20-something years. But you know what? Whenever I go to Dubai or South Africa or China or to the Middle East or to South America or to the Caribbean, and I got on a T-shirt with that logo on it, even people who don't know the language gonna be like, hook them, and they keep walking. So it ain't about the winning, it's about the branding.
So let me ask you this, Doc. So do you feel that there's a lack of branding for UT, or what's happening? Like you said,
I think the branding is about to go to another level. You talk about the play on the field.
I'd say that because Texas owned Texas.
Well, here's my quick answer. Here's my quick answer. If you look at the teams that have won the national championship in the last 10 years, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State,
LSU.
Georgia's been in the mix a little bit, Florida's been in the mix a little bit. What you will notice is that all of those schools are at the same level academically. All of them. When you start talking about Texas, USC, Michigan, Washington, Notre Dame, places like that, it's a step up academically, all right? So I told people as long as UT's admission standards stay the way they are, and with USC, they not going to win nothing anytime soon. Quite frankly, it is easier to get kids into those other schools than it is a place like Texas, Michigan, Notre Dame, or SC.
So I won't debate you about Texas and its academic standards, but I'll go back to USC. And part of it, when Pete Carroll was there, Pete told his staff that we can't have any of these kids leave Los Angeles. We have to put a lockdown on it. And they did, and they won. And then they said that we could go out and cherry pick. And what I was trying to get at is Texas was the same way. If you were in the state of Texas and you were a football player, you were going to UT. Now, and that's why I think Texas A&M was upset, because they've been able to get good athletes. And you look at all the other Texas teams, and then Ohio State comes down there and cherry picks and everything else. Yeah. So for them to be successful, they got to lock down Texas. No question.
So I think we can all agree that if this move, does happen, it will now solidify the SEC as the strongest conference in college sports. Do we all agree?
I think the SEC is a bit overrated, Lericia. I'm just be honest with you. I think it's a bit overrated. All SEC chanting, college football, the last 10 years, you had 3 teams: Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson, 4 in Oklahoma. The SEC is not deep. I think they are living off an unearned reputation for being this brutal conference. And I just think the conference is slightly overrated.
All right, now,
and I know you got something to say, so go ahead, Lericia.
Are you speaking in terms of academics, or are you speaking in terms of play on the field? Because I think it's pretty evident. Because I think it's pretty evident that the SEC has proven themselves as it pertains to play on the field and their prominence.
No, Lericia, my issue with SEC is that I went to Ohio State, okay? I went to Jackson State. You're not going to hear me at Jackson State cheering for Southern or Valley and doing SWAC chants in the stands. At Ohio State, we're not cheering for nobody else. We're not going to start chanting Big Ten, Big Ten. These SEC fans, it's like the former Confederacy. They chanting SEC. Where the hell is this? Where do they get this stuff from? You cheer for your team and your team only. If Texas ain't winning, I ain't cheering for nobody in the Big 12. If Ohio State ain't winning, I ain't cheering for nobody else at Ohio State. And in the SWAC, if J-State winning, I ain't cheering for nobody else.
Wait a minute now. As a person who is from an HBCU, I can honestly say that when my team, Bethune-Cookman, when they are competing against someone, of course, it's all Wildcats. Let's go Wildcats. But if there is another HBCU going up against a PWI or whatever other institution, I'm all about switching it. Let's go HBCU You're right. Or whatever. So you can't say that it's not something that's common, because it is common.
Y'all not going to chant MEAC in the stands.
Yes, we will if it's a MEAC school. And I've seen SWAC institutions chant SWAC and HBCU and whatever else, even if they, 1, aren't members of the SWAC, and 2, aren't even members of the institution. I've seen it happen. So you can't say it's not common.
We got HBCU love without a doubt. That's universal. For sure. But this SEC nonsense, I taught at LSU for 9 years and I got tired of it. Tired of that SEC nonsense.
It's the same love, Doc. It's the same love, just a different conference, a different institution.
So Wayne, we're going to have to go overtime on this question. We got to go overtime. So, Doc, my question to you and Lericia. So now you look at the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have research institutions, and that's the only institution they'll let in. But now if you look at it, those pickings are slim. Are they going to lower their standards and take in these other schools? Or are they going to really follow the dollars and just have this be because of money and not about education?
You mean the Big Ten?
And the
You talking about the Big
Pac-12.
Ten, Kevin? Pac-12.
Yes,
I
and
think
the
what you find in
Pac-12.
the Big Ten, I think Michigan, Ohio State is an outlier. I mean, I think at some point Ohio State wanted to be like an SEC school. I mean, I go to the games and I'm embarrassed sometimes by the way Ohio State fans act. And I'm like, we didn't used to act like that. I think Ohio State is an outlier. And let me give you an example. You know, everybody wants to know across the country why Michigan didn't fire John Harbaugh. Michigan could care less about winning a national championship in football. Look at what they're bringing in terms of research productivity, the academic rankings. And I told people Harbaugh runs a clean program. You know, he took the whole football team to South Africa 2 years ago. And so I think there's this idea that Michigan and all these other schools want to be like Ohio State. No, they want to beat Ohio State, but Michigan is clear in its identity. USC is clear in its identity. And we know UCLA is clear in its identity. I think in terms of the Pac-12 and its desire to win, I think you put Oregon and maybe Arizona State along in the caliber of Ohio State, where the fans are sort of win at all costs. But it ain't going to happen with Michigan, Purdue, and those other places. It just ain't happening.
Understood, and we're going to put a pin in it right there after Doc gave that eloquent answer, AD, and we're going to move on now to the NFL, where there has been an update as it pertains to Deshaun Watson and everything that he has been dealing with. He reported to training camp, and there are no restrictions from the NFL on the quarterback's participation in the club activities. That, according to a statement from the league on Tuesday. Now, we know that Watson is still waiting to hear from the NFL about a status for the 2021 season after 22 lawsuits alleging sexual assault and inappropriate behavior were filed during the offseason. He could still be placed on the commissioner's exempt list, which would mean he could not play but would be paid. Were you all shocked about hearing, that he reported to training camp, one, just so he wouldn't be fined? And do you think further action needs to take place and happen as it pertains to his situation and the 22 lawsuits against him, meaning that there should be restrictions in place simply because of the lawsuits and other allegations outside of actual football itself as it pertains to Deshaun Watson? Doc?
Well, let me fill in until we get Leonard back.
Okay. Go ahead, AD.
I think you have to look at it like the Major League Baseball is dealing with the Bauer who pitches for the Dodgers. They put him on administrative leave and they're still paying him, and they're waiting to see the outcome of these investigations. I think it does everybody a sense of well-being if they would do that with Deshaun. Not saying that he's innocent or guilty, but to get through it and to see just where this lies, to have some consistency. The NFL has not been consistent on many of the ways they've handled this. I mean, you look at Ray Rice, you look at some of you look at that kicker who, he got to play, and it was very clear that he had done what he did as far as sexual assault. So, I guess they're going by a case-by-case basis, and there is no consistency. So I think that they have to look at that, and they have to answer to that.
They do have to answer to that. I think there should be still something else in place, because you want to make sure that, like you said, you're being consistent, but you're also being fair in all of this. And I do believe that Watson showed up so that he wouldn't simply get fined, but it also, in essence, from the perspective of the victims, they might be questioning, well, what about us? Or is he not being punished for this? I think they also, have a voice in the say so and should be heard, because they might be looking at this as, his life still gets to go on while, we might be suffering. So I think it's a lot to look at. It's a lot to really process and handle here as it pertains to his lawsuits. But I do think there should be some restrictions in place right now, especially with everything that he has going on in the off season. Doc, your perspective?
I think it's tough, and I think for a lot of us, we really like Deshaun Watson. We like him, and so I think there's a part of us that's like, oh man, this can't be true. You know what I mean? But obviously, something has gone on, and my thing is, do the investigation, wrap it up, because you can't have, this limbo situation, and we understand that, even if there were no laws broken, we understand there may be some NFL policy violations. And I'm with Kevin. There just need to be a consistent policy about how things are going to get handled, and things can't get handled in a haphazard fashion.
For sure.
Well, hey, Doc, the other thing I think this shows is that if you're a star player, there's going to be certain leniency where if it was somebody who was a special teams player, they probably would have dealt with it differently.
Absolutely. Yeah, true. Yeah, true.
So you're saying that the money and the status plays a role in it as well, AD?
I think we've seen examples of that before. And so, and I can't explain any way other than looking at Deshaun's case that this is happening there. And the other thing is that he's trying to force a trade because Texas didn't want him to show up. That was very clear. So he's trying to force something. And, I just hope that this comes out where everybody is treated fairly and that what happens, and that it's for the good of the whole and that we learn from it. Maybe the NFL, as you were saying, comes up with some policies that's consistent with what we're looking at now.
For sure. Also want to remind everyone that Houston has been operating as if Watson would not be in the mix of things starting in 2021. They did sign Tyrod Taylor, who I believe understands or feels as if he will be the starting quarterback, despite them also having Jeff Driscoll and having just drafted Davis Mills to the team as well. So we shall see what happens and what goes forth over in Houston. Moving on now to a particular situation that is very prominent right now, as we are still in a pandemic. Unvaccinated NFL players and fines. The players will be subject to a fine of over $14,000, about $14,650 every time they violate COVID-19 procedures. Now, the stipulations place a premium on wearing appropriate PPE and offer other restrictions on a number of people and types of venues players may gather in a social or team-related purpose. Another aspect of this that I've seen recently as well is that the NFL will allow teams to use wristbands to identify or distinguish the vaccinated players versus the unvaccinated. Tampa Bay and also the Steelers are among those utilizing the wristbands. Two things here, guys. Are you a fan of the wristbands? We know that the NFLPA are against the use of the color-coded wristbands, deeming it unnecessary. And are you a fan of the fines as it pertains to the unvaccinated players and if they violate COVID-19 protocols?
Lericia, I think every employer should require that their employees get vaccinated. I took my son up to some football camps at Harvard and Princeton, and guess what I had to bring with me? I had to bring with me a record of his immunization history, measles shots, all smallpox vaccine, all that kind of stuff. So, we've been doing this stuff for a long time where you got to show proof of a vaccine before you can get your kids in school and stuff like that. And so I'm just trying to understand, what the problem is now. And let me say this to a lot of athletes who don't want to get the vaccine. All the nonsense they put in their body, they don't understand half the stuff they're putting in their body. But now the vaccine, you don't want to put it in your body. And I just think that's problematic. And, I got a lot of good friends in South Africa. And here's what's tragic to me. I'll be going to South Africa in a couple of months. And my thing is this. If y'all don't want the vaccine, hell, let me take a crate of vaccines over there with me to Cape Town. And those folks want the vaccine. And here we are in privileged America saying that we don't want it.
AD?
So I think that if you don't want to be vaccinated, that's your choice. But if you don't want to be vaccinated, you can't play. And, the other thing is that the NFL could afford to put them on paid administrative leave, because if they don't get paid, then the union's going to get involved. But for the health of all the other players and personnel that have been vaccinated, then that's a disservice to them. So that's what I would suggest that they do. I see people dying on the news, doubt saying, I wish I would have taken the vaccine. And it's sad that, we're still looking at people, and that's the only way that their mind will be changed. We're heading back to where we were 6 months ago because people, Americans have such a short-term memory, and that, we've put that aside and that, it's gone. And it's over and we're okay now, and we could do the same foolishness. And we talked about this. 100,000 people in Milwaukee go 17,000 inside, 65,000 plus outside. None of them wearing a mask, no social distancing, and we're going to see the outcome of what that is in a couple of weeks, and to see how that goes. So now we're going back, and we're going to have full stadiums and everything else, and we got folks that are selfish and they're not getting vaccinated, and it's starting all over again. And now we know. We didn't know before. Now we know. So it's our bad now. Before there was an excuse, and we were going through this, but we all know, and we've been educated, and we know how valuable it is to have the vaccine. And so I think that we just have to take that stance.
And so, Lericia, you're an SEC fan. So right now, as it relates to COVID, who is the most important voice? It ain't the CDC. It ain't Fauci. It ain't those governors. I want you to take a stab at it. Who is the only person right now who can get those folks to go get that vaccine?
I plead the fifth.
Who, Lericia?
I plead the fifth.
Greg Sankey, SEC commissioner. If y'all folks don't go get that vaccine, we're not going to have no games. And we know people in the South will put football in front of their politics anytime. So, Greg Sankey, let us know what kind of help you need from his brother, but the country's counting on you to get those folks vaccinated.
So, hey, Doc, I don't know what kind of voice Sankey has, but I'll tell you who does is Nick Saban.
Oh, absolutely.
And if Nick Saban came out and said something, that's like God, telling, the multitude what's going on. So I think that, that's, if I was to be in the SEC and I wanted to market this, I'd have Nick talk about it. Or I'm sorry, Coach Saban.
Yeah.
So speaking of COVID, though, I do want to give a few updated highlights from everything that has been taking place thus far. We know that the CDC, they are now saying that vaccinated people should mask up again in areas of high transmission as a result of this new Delta variant. Now, we know that there has been a lot of hesitancy, not only in the Black community, but really and truthfully across the boards. But being that we are African Americans, we all three of us have seen, those who look like us have these negative thoughts, right, about the vaccination. Why do you think that hesitancy exists in the African American community?
I think we have a long history. I think we have a long history of, people, the medical industry using Black people for medical experimentation. Or in the case of Tuskegee, the lack of treatment, knowing people had a disease. But even more contemporarily, Lericia, the data shows now that African Americans, rarely get referred to a specialist. How many of us have had an uncle or aunt who may have some chest pains or something, go to the doctor, they send them home 2 or 3 hours later, they've passed. And so I think that is just, so there's a reason for the skepticism, and I completely understand it.
Yeah, Doc, you're absolutely right. There is a distrust. But this is even more than it goes on racial lines. It goes on economic lines. Because if you look at who is lacking the vaccination, it's economically disadvantaged people. So it goes far beyond, Hispanics and African Americans. It goes into other communities where, as you're saying, there's a lack of medical coverage, and that, I think it goes that far. So, that's my concern.
Well, regardless of everything, we do want to remind people to please be safe. Please make sure you use caution, and that you're aware of your surroundings and those that you are that you come into contact with, because COVID again is on the rise. This new Delta variant is something that is serious, and we see that it's now affecting a lot of people. We literally saw today that there has been a big jump in COVID cases in Japan, where the Olympics is currently taking place. About 3,177 new cases reported in one day. So this is still happening and going around. And we just urge everyone to use protection and caution as you go forth through your day, regardless of whatever your decision may be about the vaccine. As we prepare to wrap up our show, guys, of course, we got to give you the opportunity to give your final thoughts, your final words, whatever that may be. Go ahead and share what's on your mind. AD.
I just want to continue our conversation and just tell everybody, wear a mask, go get vaccinated, have social distances. I mean, it's not a problem, and it's not discomforting to wear a mask. I'm sorry. These people say that, it impedes what they need to do. Come on, folks. Save a life.
So I turned 50 Saturday. I'm a big 50. It feels great. I'm blessed. I am blessed to be 50. Me and my wife and my kids, we flew to Atlanta and hung out with my nephews and their kids. I'm a laid back guy. I didn't need a fancy restaurant. We went to my favorite soul food spot in Atlanta, Lericia, called This Is It. And they got the best chitlins around. So we took the food home, and I had me a nice big bowl of chitlins. And see, I'm not bourgeois like y'all. I don't forget my roots. You know what I mean? I tell somebody I will eat all aspects of the hog: sausage, hot dog, bacon. But to me, the delicacy of that hog is chitlins. And I had a wonderful time celebrating 50 years with my family.
Happy birthday, Doc. So from the Rudy to the Tootie, right?
That's right.
Well, Doc, let me just say, I know all about This Is It. The rib tips they have there, bomb. But if you want some good chitlins, you can also come hang out with my family down here in the country in Brunswick, Georgia. We get
Hey, I'll be there the day after Thanksgiving.
Well, we greatly appreciate you all joining us this morning for another edition of Fourth and Just Us. Remember, we are here every Wednesday, 10 o'clock in the morning, Facebook Live, also on YouTube. Don't forget to like us and subscribe to us on those platforms. We appreciate you listening to our views, our perspectives, and be sure to join us again next week. Same time, same place, right here on Fourth and Just Us.